In the Battlestar Galactica reboot, the Colonial fleet is often remembered for its iconic Battlestars and Viper squadrons. However, the military structure of the 12 colonies was more than just a collection of heroic warships. Even though most of the Colonial Navy was destroyed during the Cylon attack, the series still gives us enough on-screen evidence to identify the core military ship categories that form the backbone of Colonial space warfare. Unlike many science fiction universes filled with dozens of ship classes and exaggerated fleets, Battlestar Galactica presents a deliberately restrained and realistic military structure. The colonies relied on a small number of highly specialized platforms, each filling a clearly defined tactical role. In reboot canon, there are only 4 true military ship categories: Battlestars, Vipers, Raptors, and a stealth reconnaissance prototype known as the Blackbird. Battlestars were the largest and most powerful vessels operated by the Colonial Navy. They functioned as capital ships, mobile command centers, and carrier platforms for fighter squadrons. 2 Battlestar classes are seen on screen: the Jupiter class, represented by Galactica, and the Mercury class, represented by Pegasus. These ships were heavily armored and designed to survive sustained combat. Unlike traditional science fiction battleships that rely primarily on energy weapons, Colonial Battlestars used kinetic artillery, missile batteries, and nuclear warheads. This design choice reflected the colonial military doctrine of overwhelming physical firepower combined with durability. Battlestars were also designed to operate independently. Each carried its own air wing, manufacturing facilities, medical bays, and internal support systems. This allowed them to remain operational far from friendly territory, a feature that became essential after the fall of the colonies. In the post-apocalypse setting of the series, Battlestars were no longer just warships. They became the backbone of humanity's survival. Vipers served as the primary space superiority fighters of the colonial military. 2 main variants appear in the reboot: the Viper Mark II and the more advanced Viper Mark VII. These small, agile craft were designed for dogfighting, interception, and escort missions. They formed the first line of defense against Cylon raiders and were often deployed in large formations to protect Battlestars and civilian ships. The contrast between the Mark II and Mark VII models also highlights a major theme of the series. The older Mark II fighters relied on simpler systems and were resistant to network-based attacks. The newer Mark VII, while technologically superior, was vulnerable to Cylon infiltration due to its integrated computer systems. This difference became one of the most important strategic factors early in the war and reinforced the show's recurring warning about over-reliance on automation and network warfare. Raptors were the most versatile military ships in the Colonial fleet. Unlike Vipers, which were built purely for combat, Raptors were multi-role platforms capable of performing a wide range of missions. Their duties included recon, electronic warfare, long-range scouting, personnel transport, search and rescue operations, and battlefield coordination. Raptors were often used as mobile command posts, allowing officers to direct fleet movements and combat operations from outside Battlestars. In many ways, Raptors acted as the logistical and informational backbone of colonial military operations. While they lacked the firepower of Battlestars and the speed of Vipers, they provided flexibility and adaptability, qualities that proved critical during the constant hit-and-run engagements with Cylon forces. The Blackbird represents the most experimental military craft seen in the series. Built after the fall of the colonies, using salvaged parts and improvised technology, it was designed as a dedicated stealth recon platform. Unlike other colonial ships, the Blackbird was not meant for combat. Its primary purpose was to gather intelligence while avoiding detection. This marked a significant shift in colonial tactics, acknowledging that information and surveillance could be just as important as raw firepower. The existence of the Blackbird also demonstrates the colony's ability to adapt under extreme pressure. With limited resources and constant enemy pursuit, the fleet still managed to produce a functional prototype capable of infiltrating Cylon-controlled space, like the Cylon Resurrection ship. It symbolized the transition from traditional fleet warfare to asymmetric survival strategies. What makes the colonial military structure particularly interesting is not what it includes, but what it lacks. There are no massive armadas of specialized warships, no endless variations of destroyers or cruisers, and no exaggerated superweapons beyond nuclear deterrence. Instead, The Colonial Navy relied on a small number of highly adaptable platforms. Battlestars served as both carriers and battleships. Vipers handled frontline combat. Raptors provided flexibility and coordination. The Blackbird represented experimentation and intelligence gathering. This minimalist approach fits the grounded tone of Battlestar Galactica. It reinforces the idea that the colonies were not an unstoppable military empire, but a fragile civilization whose survival depended on improvisation, discipline, and human decision-making, rather than technological dominance alone. Although Battlestar Galactica is a science fiction series, its depiction of military hardware is strongly influenced by real-world naval and Air Force doctrine. The creators deliberately avoided exaggerated space opera designs and instead modeled colonial ships around recognizable military roles. When viewed through this lens, the colonial fleet begins to resemble a hybrid of modern naval task forces and air combat groups, adapted to operate in space rather than on Earth. Battlestars most closely resemble modern aircraft carriers, combined with the firepower and armor philosophy of traditional battleships. Like carriers, battlestars function as mobile air bases. They deploy fighter squadrons, coordinate large-scale operations, and serve as command hubs for fleet activity. At the same time, battlestars retain heavy direct-fire weaponry. Unlike real-world carriers, which rely on escort ships for protection, colonial battlestars are designed to fight on the front lines themselves. Their thick armor plating, broadside artillery, missile batteries, and nuclear strike capability allow them to absorb punishment while continuing operations. This dual-role design reflects a practical necessity. In deep space, far from supply lines and friendly ports, the colonies could not rely on large escort fleets. Each battlestar had to be self-sufficient, capable of projecting power and defending itself without external support. The result is a warship that blends the command role of an aircraft carrier with the survivability of a heavy surface combatant. Vipers occupy the same tactical role as modern fighter aircraft. Their primary purpose is air, or in this case, space superiority. They intercept enemy craft, escort high-value assets, and engage hostile forces in fast-paced dogfights. The contrast between the Viper Mark II and Mark VII mirrors real-world generational shifts in fighter technology. Older aircraft models are often simpler, easier to maintain, and more mechanically reliable. Newer generations prioritize networking, sensor integration, and digital warfare capabilities. In the show, this technological evolution becomes a vulnerability. The Mark VII's advanced systems allow for superior performance, but also expose it to cyber warfare and enemy interference. This reflects real-world concerns about modern military aircraft becoming increasingly dependent on software, data links, and electronic systems that can be disrupted or exploited. Raptors are best understood as the colonial equivalent of multi-role military aircraft and helicopters. They combine the functions of reconnaissance planes, transport aircraft, electronic warfare platforms, and airborne command centers. In modern militaries, these roles are distributed across several specialized aircraft types. Surveillance planes provide battlefield awareness, helicopters transport troops and perform rescue missions, and command aircraft coordinate large operations. Raptors compress all of these functions into a single platform, reflecting the colony's need for efficiency and flexibility in space. This design makes Raptors less glamorous than Vipers, but far more strategically important. Without reconnaissance, coordination, and logistics support, frontline combat units quickly become ineffective. Raptors enable the colonial fleets to operate as an organized force rather than a collection of isolated ships. The Blackbird has one of the most direct, real-world parallels in modern military history. It mirrors the role of high-altitude and stealth recon aircraft designed to penetrate hostile territory without being detected. Its purpose is not to fight, but to observe. Intelligence gathering allows commanders to make informed decisions, avoid ambushes, and plan operations more effectively. In many real conflicts, superior information has proven more decisive than raw firepower. What makes the colonial fleet feel believable is not its technology, but its structure. The colonies do not rely on fantastical superweapons or unrealistic armadas. Instead, they use the same basic military principles found in real-world forces like power projection, air superiority, recon, logistics support, and command coordination. The main difference is the environment. Space removes the limitations of oceans and atmosphere, but the underlying logic of warfare remains the same. Ships still need protection, pilots still need support, and commanders still depend on accurate information. By grounding its military design in real-world doctrine, Battlestar Galactica creates a fleet that feels functional rather than decorative. The Colonial Navy does not exist to look impressive. It exists to survive, adapt, and fight under extreme conditions. When all colonial military ship categories are viewed together, a clear pattern emerges. The colonial fleet was not designed for conquest or territorial expansion. It was built around endurance, self-sufficiency, and crisis response. Even before the fall of the 12 colonies, colonial military doctrine favored versatility over specialization and survivability over elegance. Battlestars were built to operate independently for long periods of time. They carried their own fighters, medical facilities, manufacturing equipment, and command infrastructure. Vipers prioritized reliability and pilot skill rather than full automation. Raptors provided flexibility, allowing the fleet to adapt quickly to changing situations. Even the Blackbird, developed under extreme scarcity, reflects a shift toward intelligence-driven survival tactics rather than brute force warfare. After the Cylon attack, this doctrine became humanity's only advantage. The colonial fleet was no longer a traditional navy. It became a moving refugee civilization, forced to combine military operations with humanitarian survival. Warships were no longer just tools of combat. They became shields protecting millions of civilians traveling through hostile space. This transformation exposed the true purpose of colonial military design. The goal was not victory in a conventional sense, but continuity. Every jump, every patrol, and every engagement was about buying time. Time to find fuel, time to repair damaged hulls, time to preserve what remained of human society. At the same time, Battlestar Galactica makes it clear that technology alone was never enough. The colonies possessed powerful warships, nuclear weapons, and advanced fighters, yet they still lost their homeworlds in a matter of hours. Survival depended not on hardware, but on leadership, discipline, cooperation, and moral choices made under pressure. The contrast between Galactica and Pegasus perfectly illustrates this point. Both were powerful battlestars, yet their effectiveness was shaped not by their weapons, but by the philosophies of the people commanding them. The same ships could become symbols of protection or instruments of cruelty, depending on how they were used. In the end, the colonial fleet represents more than a collection of military assets. It represents a civilization trying to preserve its identity while constantly under threat of extinction. Battlestar Galactica's greatest achievement is not its ship designs, but how those designs support the story's central theme, which is that survival is not about having the strongest fleet. It is about adaptation, restraint, and the ability to endure when everything familiar has been lost. The Colonial Navy did not save humanity by winning the war. It saved humanity by refusing to collapse. So that's it. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.